Fabulous with Vibs and Vicky. The ThinqShift podcast for professionals who aspire to be fabulous leaders. Those who not only succeed, but also purposefully seek to reinvent the world.
Welcome to another episode of Be Fabulous. Today we're talking about entrepreneurship. For many of us, being our own boss sounds like a dream. We get to have a greater impact in the world. We get to pursue our passion. Perhaps we get to build something from scratch. That might be of interest to us. When we're our own boss, we have our own autonomy. We have increased flexibility as we get to create our schedules. We don't have to deal with office politics. All those unnecessary meetings, what a drag. Performance reviews, oh my gosh. All those other administrative tasks that feel like we're sticking pins and needles in our eyes. And actually, sometimes we want to be our own boss because we're an unnatural fit for the corporate structure. And to those around us, our managers, our peers, we can feel like a difficult employee and they have to try and work with us. There are so many reasons where being our own boss feels like a wonderful thing.
Hold on a second.
Vibs,
hold on a minute.
Who wouldn't want to be an entrepreneur?
See, you made that sound like some sort of utopia. I'm sitting here going off into La La Land thinking, geez, that sounds so beautiful and so wonderful. And I didn't feel that way to me. I can tell you that. It's really good. And I think that, what you described there is the promise of entrepreneurship that so many people have in their minds. And I think probably before we kind of get into this topic, because I bet you this is probably going to be one of the most popular ones we've done so far, because so many people that we touch and the kind of people that kind of listen to us kind of have these kind of latent aspirations. They either are entrepreneurs or they have latent aspirations to be entrepreneurs or whatever. And I think it's probably a good idea for us to just sort of take a quick step back and just kind of define it for the purpose of this podcast, because it's a, like a lot of things, probably a bit of an abused term, don't you think?
I do. I did make it sound very glamorous.
No, you did. You went full on Vicky. Wonderful. It was 100% Vicky there. It was.
So let's go into it then. What actually is an entrepreneur? Let's ground ourselves on how do we think about entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I did my usual sort of a little bit of research beforehand, because there's so many ways of I was trying to figure out how do people categorize this stuff. Someone somewhere's given this some thought. How do people categorize it? And there's many tools and frameworks out there, but probably just for the purpose of this conversation, you get different types. You get you get the people who are kind of innovators, if you like. They have an entirely new business idea. They want to change the way people think about something or do something or have a product or service that's different. That comes from that place of passion that you described, and it's almost like obsessive. I have this. I have this obsessive idea, and I don't care if anyone else agrees with me or disagrees with me. I'm so caught up in it that nothing is going to stop me. That kind of.
Yeah, it almost feels like your reason for being on the planet.
Yeah, and it's and I think that's the one that gets a lot of press, if you like, because I think when that, it almost never works, but when it does work, it works fabulously well. That's what creates your Elon Musks, and that's what creates your Steve Jobs and so when it works, it's extraordinary, but it's also doesn't work that often. Okay. Then you got your hustlers, right? You've got your, I'm just going to work really, really hard, and I'd rather build my own business doing the same thing that I'm doing in my employment rather than do it for someone else. And that means that, someone else is making all the money from the fruit of my labors, and I think I could do it better than them. And I'm going to pretend that what I do is radically different, but it's actually the same old stuff with maybe slightly different packaging, maybe slightly different pitch, maybe slightly different branding, and you convince yourself that you are somehow radically different. But what's really making you different is just the pure hustle of making it work. Okay?
Yeah, the long hours.
And I think we see a lot of that in the
professional services
vanity field as well. Yeah. Same thing, put a different brand on it, because you can feel like you're being very successful very quickly. The problem is it's very hard to sustain and it's kind of like you kind of find yourself in the fad economy when you do that. You've got to be a bit careful with that one. Okay. But then you get imitators. That's just, I see someone doing it. I could do that. Let me go and do that as well. Okay. Copycats. Okay. And that's a different type of entrepreneur. My point is, it's a different type of mentality, and it's a different way of looking at risk. It's a different way of looking at, why you're doing it. You get a lot of get rich quick kind of mentality in imitators. Someone out there is doing that. I could do that, and I could make $400,000 in my free time while doing nothing. Kind of, you get that kind of seductive feel. Then you got your researcher type of entrepreneurs. These are the people who have done the source work. They thoroughly think things through. They identify a small niche or a particular area, or they've had some technical breakthrough, or where they're just kind of ahead of the game and they're looking to kind of monetize that kind of innovation. So that's more, those sorts of entrepreneurs are really sort of planning type folks, if you like. Let me just plan this out and then the plan can't fail kind of folks. Okay. And then you got buyer type of entrepreneurs. And these people are the ones that are blessed with capital. And they are, well, I could throw money over here. I could throw money over there. I could throw money over here. What do I feel like investing in today? And that's like almost like your sort of serial entrepreneurs, your venture type of entrepreneurs. They probably are better at buying companies that are very early in their formation, and they take on the burden of that entrepreneurial effort to get it from that initial idea into something that's in the market. Okay. And there's many more. There's many more. That's not exclusive, but I think it's just, I wanted to just put it out there that even as I'm saying that, I bet you some people are identifying more with one or the other of those, or maybe even when they look at their own companies, like, oh yeah, I am truly one of those people who thinks I do something completely different, but it's not really that different, that kind of thing. Okay.
So what do we mean by entrepreneur for the purposes of this podcast?
Yeah. So I think there's a fabulous lens, like there always is, to everything that we do. And I think given that we're focusing more on, professionals, okay, who are trying to figure out if they want to be entrepreneurs, or they've got an idea and they're trying to figure out whether they want to do it or not. What I always say is, firstly, just be clear in your mind about what entrepreneurship is for you. And I'll tell you, here's how I look at it in really simple terms. I think you have the category of entrepreneur that is, I just want to have my own business and I just want to find work for me and keep myself busy. And that to me is, when in England, we used to call those people self-employed. We never used to call those people. No one who was self-employed in England would say, I have my own business. In the US, though, of course, everyone has their own business if they're self-employed. And I think, so technically that's true. Legally, that's true because, you have your LLC or whatever. But the motivation is really to create some income for yourself. Okay. And so most people, when they talk about side hustles and stuff like that, that's kind of also where they're going to in their heads. Okay. And to me, what I would say is, for the purpose of fabulousness, that's not an entrepreneur, even though technically it is. Okay. To me, a better definition for our purpose is, an entrepreneur is someone who creates employment opportunities for others. Okay. So if I'm going to create a business that's going to require me to integrate the other efforts of other people, or build a product or service that's going to generate economic value through employment of others, now it's a business, because now you've got a different type of because it gives you more scaling. It gives you you have to think about all the dimensions of having a successful business a lot more than you have to do if you're just trying to earn some income to maintain the lifestyle without having a boss. So to me, it's two different things,
So it's a little bit like Uber, the company, having the infrastructure set up to enable the drivers versus the drivers who are self-employed, who need their own little companies, a little bit of insurance, and
you think about how we sell that, right? I mean the collective we. Okay, so you convince the drivers that they're self-employed, they have maximum freedom, they can work when they want to work, they can earn as much as they want to earn, And what do we really hear about most Uber drivers, particularly in urban areas? They can't make ends meet. They're working 16 hours a day. They don't have employment protection. All of these sorts of things, right? And so then you get into the, was that really entrepreneurship, or was that really a way to exploit human beings or employees in a way that absolves you of certain economic obligations towards human beings that are fulfilling resources? And I'm not here to argue which is right and which is wrong on this podcast. We can do that in a different one if you like. But that to me is where sometimes we sell the wonder of entrepreneurship when we make it sound sexy, when in fact the economic return is really very low, and in many respects it's lower than it would be with the trade-off of employment. I'd say another area we see that a lot is in social media. The promise, the influencer economy, if you will. Very few people really make really good money as influencers, but and you get then you get sucked into having to produce content constantly because your number of clicks determines how much you earn, and you convince yourself that if you've got a social platform then suddenly money's going to fall from the skies and business is going to. It doesn't. I mean, you think about the number of people who post on LinkedIn who never get any kind of monetary return, but you speak to any business coach and they'll tell you post 1 billion stuff on LinkedIn. To me, that's great. It's not fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah. It really gives you the return. I mean, you hear that from people, very few.
And the ones it does create a return for are the ones that have turned those things into platforms, right? So they are employing others, then they're employing producers, then they're employing others. But that worked. I mean, if you're Mr. Beast and you got in on that like 10 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever it was, it works. You've established that, gazillion person following and you're producing good content, but those things are almost like little TV production companies at that point, and they're not lifestyle businesses. They're not working when they want to work. They're not, that's real work, and that's what I mean by I think we, what we market and what the reality is something that I wish, particularly those people who get attracted by what you hear me refer to as the vanity industries. I think you give up an awful lot for a perceived sense of freedom, which isn't really that free, I guess,
Yeah. Well, if they had to take a little bit of time and think about the return on investment for all the hours they spent posting, what they actually got from it, you'd realize it's not a way to necessarily make money for most people. You might want to do it for other reasons.
I think it also comes down to what constitutes making money, right? How much is what is important. And then I think back to, for some people who may have been in like terribly low paid jobs, okay? I mean, I know, funny enough, I know a couple of people who decided to go down the social media route to teach, because teaching is so badly paid in the West anyway, certainly in the US, okay? I'm talking about high school teaching and junior elementary teaching. It's so badly paid that if you only need to make 35, 40, 50,000 to feel like you're doing so much better than you were, then that feels a lot more achievable. But if you're after 6 figures, 6 figures, double 6 figures, 7 figures, right, it's not going to happen. So I think it also depends on kind of where you are on the economic, just on your income level. If you're earning 200 grand a year, okay, and then you think that somehow posting a bunch of stuff on X or on Instagram or creating a following is suddenly going to make 200 grand drop from the skies, it's probably not going to happen, Yeah.
It's also made me think about the multi-level marketing industry, where, over 60%, probably even higher, of the US economy doesn't have the extra $400 needed for an emergency. And if you can create just that a month, it gives you that extra flexibility, which is what a lot of people sign up for that. That's a different story again. If you're battling to make ends meet, then these things are extremely helpful.
And if you think about in the US, it's two people who didn't grow up here. I mean, that law of entrepreneurship is so baked into the American dream. I mean, it's even down to when we started ThinqShift. It's amazing how many people sort of try to make it work for you. That felt very different in the UK. It almost felt like you were fighting against people trying to make it work for you. Whereas here it was like, Okay, good on you. You're trying it. How can we help? And now they'll give you. So I always say, in the States, generally speaking, people will give you a chance, but then you better deliver. Like, you're not, you won't get chance after chance after chance. It's not very forgiving from an entrepreneurship point of view, but you will get a chance. Whereas, maybe certainly in England, I felt like the proportion of times that someone gives you a chance is a lot lower. And, I do think it's a good thing. I do think it's a good thing, but it's
a lot more cynical as a society, right?
Yeah, but the flip side is, I think we end up telling people that things are going to be successful and encouraging them and providing optimism for their ideas when they're ridiculous. They're stupid. They can't work. There's that kind of work. And then we don't want to burst someone's bubble, so we won't tell them. I mean, I'm talking about as a society, as a culture. And that's probably not so good either. Yeah. So, there's as with everything, I think there's a little bit of cultural tuning that's required here,
Yeah. So, Vibs, let's talk about the dark side of being an entrepreneur. So we've defined what being an entrepreneur is and the different kinds and what we mean by it in broadly the professional sense. Not necessarily someone being self-employed, but someone who's actually creating income for others as well. So we've got an idea. We know how we're going to do this. What is the dark side of then being an entrepreneur? We've launched the business. What are some of the things that we also need to think about as we go forward with all of this?
Yeah. Well, okay. There's so many places we could go. Firstly, it's not easy. It's just not. It's hard. It's multifaceted. There's no. Everyone will tell you, I've got a script and I've got a plan and this is how you do it and so forth. But it's always very different because every person is different and everyone's motivations, their fears, their concerns, their skills, the resources that they have around them are different. So I guess, I think dark side, so many places you can go to. Loneliness maybe is probably the first one. I always say that I've not met an entrepreneur who didn't feel some sense of I feel like I'm alone. Yeah. And whether that's no one thinks this is a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then having the ability to do that. Because generally speaking, it's quite hard to do something without encouragement. And if you say you want to be an entrepreneur and build something, for most people, that's a risky thing. And so, I mean, even family, right? Even friends. Are you sure you want to do that? You've got such a good job. You're earning stable income. Why would you want to do that? That kind of thing. Or wait a minute.
You've got such a great title. You're so respected in the community.
Yeah. Right. And the reality is the people who want to be entrepreneurs are doing pretty well normally anyway. Right. So there is the kind of, you have to get over your own opportunity cost, right? There's something you're going to give up to do it. And so I think that to me is just being able to be sufficiently convicted or have sufficient conviction to be able to just, I hear you, I understand where you're coming from, I respect where you're coming from, but I'm still doing it. And then believe it and not second guess. So I guess what I'm getting at here, the dark side of it, I think, is it doesn't work if you are really not very self-aware and someone who has really, really strong control over their emotions.
And Vips, I loved your little Freudian slip there.
I know, convicted.
Being convicted, because it is a little
I know,
bit
some people are convicted. I mean, many entrepreneurs do scrape that line, right? They do, we call that disruptive. They are right on the edge of, maybe that's not quite right. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Is that even quite legal, right? I mean, and that because lawsuits happen afterwards for so many entrepreneurs, right? I mean, statistically.
Well, Actually, I was going to go to the place of it can feel like a little bit of a jail because now you've got to try and make this thing work.
But that's true too.
Because you put your reputation on the line, and it might feel like you're in jail because you're working all hours. You're trying to pull everyone along with you on this boat, and that they don't want to go in the same pace and direction as you, and all of that.
But if you also think about it, right? I mean, often, particularly when you talk about real innovation, you're on the edge of what's possible. Agreed?
Agreed.
So there is a lot of opportunity. Think about the AI revolution that we're in right now. There is a lot of opportunity for opportunistic entrepreneurs to make a lot of money by exploiting, let's call it deep fake technology. Okay? which is definitely going to be illegal, but it's just not illegal everywhere yet.
Yeah.
Right. So you kind of, this is kind of another reason why a lot of entrepreneurs are, strong narcissistic tendencies, right? They're kind of comfortable operating in that slightly gray area of what's ethically correct or right or wrong or appropriate or whatever. And, if they end up on the winning side of that, they're innovators and geniuses and trendsetters and world changers and whatever. If they end up on the wrong side of that, they end up in jail, right? And there is a little bit of that too. That so I think that convicted comment was coming from that place as well, literal jail as well as metaphorical jail. But I don't want to overplay that. Most people that we work with are really just good people. But there is an edge to entrepreneurs.
Well, let's chat about that next. We've talked about the dark side of it, but let's talk about being an entrepreneur. What distinguishes someone from being an entrepreneur from other.
But the wannapreneurs.
Yeah, other business people, the wannapreneurs, all of that kind of stuff. Well, firstly, how do we think about a wannapreneur? We use that kind of word.
Yeah, we use it kind of almost as a joke, but it's kind of funny. People always laugh, and then sometimes they reflect on it. Wannapreneur is just someone who says they want to be an entrepreneur, but when push comes to shove, is never going to do it. That's the simple definition that we use.
They don't have the risk appetite.
Well, it could be many reasons. Don't have, but that's the percentage case, and it, the way it comes back to some of the things I was talking about earlier. You're not really prepared to do something when other people say you can't, okay? Or you can't live with the financial stress and uncertainty. That's a really big one. Many people derive a lot of comfort from knowing they have a steady paycheck. Especially in America, where it's I think you said a statistic earlier. There's some crazy number of people that live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, it's over 60%.
It's a mad number.
Yeah,
and
they don't have the safety net, and there is no social structure.
Yeah.
So you get a medical situation, and it literally makes you bankrupt and homeless.
Right.
There is no option.
Right. And what's really interesting to me is, and I don't have the exact numbers on me. I probably should have looked this up before we got on air. But so many of those people are not minimum wage people either. They're like, I know double-digit, six-figure salary people who are living paycheck to paycheck. That seems crazy if you don't have double-digit six figures, right? It seems, but it's way more common than people think, and it is quite a large number. Yeah. People get used to a lifestyle and projecting a lifestyle, I guess. So there's that. Okay. I think another one that we hit an awful lot is so many wannapreneurs either have a block or convince themselves or don't want to sell. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean like sell like a car salesman sell. I mean like sell your idea. I mean, you can't really be an entrepreneur unless you're able to influence people that the thing that you are standing for or building or doing is going to work. It's going to make money. It's going to be good. It's valuable to the customer or client or whatever. Okay. And that's selling. And, too many people define themselves as, I'm not a salesperson. Mm-hmm. But yet those people want to be entrepreneurs, and they get really upset when people who are good at selling make more money than they do. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that's just a misunderstanding of the value of being able to sell in the economic equation, particularly for engineers. I think that one comes up an awful lot. Technical people.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we had a lot of rewiring around when we were younger, because ultimately everything in life is selling. It's just whether you use that word, which feels like a used car salesman, or whether you think of it as I'm actually helping someone, whether it might be influencing them on a particular decision or helping them with a particular problem. There are different flavors of it, but as soon as you attach the word sell, then people start to get all squirty. And ultimately, life is about using the opportunities in front of us to make the best for ourselves. And this is taking it a step further.
What I always get on that one is really funny. You find this brilliant technical people with fantastic ideas, and you're like, wow, that's a great idea. Okay. And you say to them, so how are you going to sell that then? Right. And they say, well, I'll just hire someone who can sell that. Okay. How are you going to sell it to the person that you're going to hire? You're going to end up in a loop where ultimately you're going to get to, you've got to sell it to someone, So yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, I don't know about you, but it happens to me all the time in the one-on-one work we do.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another one. This one I think you get probably more than I do. Is many people entrepreneurs have to have this, that they have to be okay with not needing to be the nice person all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't be an entrepreneur without someone hating you.
Yeah, the need to be liked, the need to be validated, all that kind of goes out the window when you make this decision.
Yeah.
Because you cannot be successful and make the choices you have to make if your first driver is the humans and the people. That always has to be the second driver.
All the time. Yeah, I mean...
All the time. Yeah. All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't mean you have to be an arsehole, by the way, just to be clear.
Yeah.
No,
I have a lot of conversations about this because people always say to me, you're such a good business person, but you care about people. And I said, well, I don't know if it's because I grew up in South Africa and there just weren't the opportunities. But at the end of the day, you better do the job really well. And then we'll think about how to take care of you and make sure you're okay. But it's not one or the other. It's not a charity. It's the fact that you're an entrepreneur is about being a business. You're not a charity.
Yeah. And I think this is where, I think it gets tricky because, from an employer and employee point of view, you want to work for a supportive environment, a caring environment, one that, all of that stuff. And that's all good. Like, that's all very, very, very good. But I think, like everything.
But not at the cost.
Not at the cost of bankruptcy.
Correct. Yeah.
Because at that point, you're not a business, right? So there's something in that, I think the other, kind of related to that is, I think many people who want to be entrepreneurs are not able to create human attraction. And by that, I don't mean look good, smell good kind of attraction. I mean gravity. Like, it might be, are you able to get people to flock to whatever it is that you're trying to do or achieve or build? Okay. And sometimes you can buy it, like you just pay people tons of money and they'll pay, you can basically appeal to their sense of greed. I'll pay you 10 times as much, or I'll give you 5% stock or whatever, right? So you can try to buy it to create gravity, but that doesn't really work for too long. But you can do that. You can inspire it, but if you inspire it, you better make sure you're working towards that. Because if people aren't feeling that inspiration, or it feels like you deviate from that, then you're going to lose them very quickly. You could try to convince people that you know what you're doing, and if you trust the process, believe the process, we have a plan, kind of. People buy into that. Or, probably the best one is have some pretty strong sense of enduring, motivating purpose sitting behind whatever it is that you're doing, which, generates personal power. And my point is, I think you have to have all of that, in some quantity. Otherwise, what happens a lot is you get entrepreneurs who convince themselves that because I've got this idea or I've got this invention, that somehow I'm going to be able to build a business. And in the end, you just can't do it without being able to construct A players around you. It's just not possible. Which is a real problem if you're a B player. That's a real problem if you're a B player. So that's something to think about. Probably a couple more if we've got a few minutes, and I'll go through these more quickly. I think the way we were defining entrepreneur, that can't be people who are attracted to the easy life type. Like if you're doing it for a work-life balance kind of play, right? Then you're not going to be what I would call a fabulous type of entrepreneur. Now, that's absolutely fine if you want to be self-employed, do your own thing. That's fine. But with that will come, a certain max in terms of how much you can earn, a certain trade-off in terms of just the kind of problems you can solve or the kind of impact that you can make because you're on your own. And that's fine. But not if you're an entrepreneur, like a true in the way that we're defining it. Yeah, you have to live it. You have to be in it. No, I only work till 5 p.m. and then I stop. There's no work-life separation. It's you're all in.
Yeah, and it's also not a get-rich-quickly idea as well. These things take time. Yes,
and what we often do is we market we market the success after it was done, right? We don't market the misery and pain to get to that point. It's I think there's that. So I think if you to start with your intro, if you're going into it, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be my own boss and life will be wonderful and I can sit on the beach for 6 hours a day. You might get to that point, but it sure as hell ain't going to be there on the journey.
Yeah.
You know?
And what about the kinds of fears that entrepreneurs have? Because yes, they need that degree of belief and excitement, and I'm going to do it anyway, and inner strength, because they're going to have all the resistance. But what kind of fears are they dealing with?
Fear of losing is a big one. Because to be an entrepreneur, I mean, because you're staking so much on whatever it is you're building, or the idea that you have, or whatever, the idea that you could be wrong. Yeah, the idea that you could be wrong. That's why most entrepreneurs somehow manage to be really, really confident, but yet paranoid at the same time. Right? Yeah.
Which then creates this, need for control.
Sure.
A sense of distrust, a desire for appreciation, all those other things that come up.
Yeah, every entrepreneur needs a shrink, for sure. For sure.
But they'll never say that. They're packaged up completely differently.
Nah, you know what? They all have shrink. At least everyone I know, every entrepreneur I know has a shrink, right? Because they've learned that if they don't have, whether it's, like most entrepreneurs I know, they'll have coaches and mentors like us, and they will have shrinks. And they almost think of it not like a corrective remedial thing. They think of it like preventative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like if you go to the gym and you work out, chances are you're going to live healthier, right? Well, let's just do the therapy anyway, just to avoid things getting so bad, right? I mean, I'm kind of joking a little bit, but the essence of what I'm saying is true. Entrepreneurs tend to have the mentality of needing these avenues of exhaust, because they tend not to be able to show those avenues of exhaust so readily in their day-to-day working environment. I think often I find entrepreneurs, they worry about someone, like envy and jealousy, almost like someone's being able to get there before I will get there. That kind of thing.
And there's also the the pointing the fingers at the entrepreneur if you're in the organization as well. Like, why can't they figure it out? Why are they doing it this way?
Yeah, and they're making it up as they go along.
it's also easy. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
It's huge expectations on not easy, especially for those entrepreneurs navigating a whole new business domain.
Yeah, totally. And we're only, if you think about it, this podcast has really only been talking about the entrepreneur getting started. Then you have a whole other issue with those same entrepreneurs who basically morph into founders. And then those businesses are successful-ish. And then they get to these like pivot points where the company, it's kind of beyond starting and it's now scaling, or it's beyond scaling, it's now striving. And now what it means to do the job of a CEO or a founder or whatever, entrepreneur, looks so different going forward. And then they may not want to do it, and they can't get out, but then they want to get their money out. But they haven't built the right teams. And I mean, that's why so many businesses fail after being successful initially. And so, so there is you have to just, the way I look at it is you can't really be an entrepreneur unless you're kind of slightly addicted to pain. Like you have to want to suffer. And that's also why you see so many athletes literal athletes are entrepreneurs. They we used to call it work hard, play hard, but you'll see them working out in the gym at 5:30 in the morning. You'll see them, whatever, you do OT, but some people do CrossFit or whatever, right? There's run ultra marathons, like, ex-colleague of ours, they will look for whatever edge they can. Yeah. And there's a kind of this weird disposition where, I know if I do a marathon, I'm going to feel like I'm going to die afterwards, but that's what makes it worth doing, so that I can do 3 more afterwards and hurt even more. That is not most people.
Totally.
They're not going to sit at home and watch Netflix when they could be out, working out, So there is that kind of, I'm not saying every entrepreneur is an athlete. I'm just saying that mentality helps tremendously, I
agree with you, Vips. All right, so let's talk about...
Hey, Vicky, I want to drop one more in. That's more, I think it's more given to anyone out there who could be an entrepreneur, but doesn't do it. Okay. And this is, I see this a lot, and I wish some of these folks would have a bit more courage. That's why I'm putting it out there. There's a certain category of should-be entrepreneurs, maybe not wannapreneurs, should be entrepreneurs who got everything. They've got the idea, they've got all those qualities we mentioned, but they just feel the need like they don't know enough, I don't know enough. I need to go and learn some more. I need to get this experience over here. Let me just go and do another year over here. Let me go to business school and do this over here. Whatever, right? Which is, I think, is great to want to learn new things, but not if you're using the fear of not knowing enough as the reason for not trying. Yeah, and I think that's a very sad use case that I see quite a lot, particularly. As we work with some of the business schools in the country as well, we see that a lot. These young entrepreneurs or young potential entrepreneurs who've got great ideas, but they
want the experience.
But they're just scared, right? I want to go and work for 2 years before I do this. I want to go and do this before I do this. I want to go to this organization before I do this. Because they think somehow they're going to get some magic utopian pixie dust that's going to make it easy for them. And it's not going to make it any easier. It's still going to feel like a step into the unknown.
And it's actually going to scare them more, because then they'll start to realize all the things that could go wrong.
Right. Yeah. Be an entrepreneur when you're young and when you have less responsibilities, because you've got less to lose.
Yeah, and ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
So Vips, let's talk about what we can do about it. The choices and consequences and how we move forward from this. So the first one is to decide. Are you one of those wantrepreneurs? Are you maybe a shouldpreneur? Or are you going to do it? If you are going to do it, make sure you've got the right idea. It's the right time. You have the right team. The right leadership. Use your advisory board to make sure that that's all going on. What else? You decide you're going to do it. Where do you go from there?
I think there's probably. I mean, you mentioned a lot of them. The ones you said probably are also. Even if you have all of the qualities we mentioned earlier, you might have the wrong idea. That meaning the world doesn't need it, or the market doesn't care about it sufficiently for it to work. Or it could just be the right thing at the wrong time. I always use Vines as an example of that. I don't know if you know, Vines was like essentially TikTok before TikTok. And, it just died literally on the Vine. Okay. And then more or less the same kind of idea popped up for a different generation.
Yeah, and there was that Friends one before Facebook. Yeah. There've been all these kinds of things that never quite worked.
Yeah. So, but they're the same thing, more or less. It happens to be the right thing at the right time, and bang, and the right team. You mentioned all of those things, but I think even irrespective of all of that, let's assume that all of that's okay. And then to me, there's some tools, some basic things like people talk about it a lot. Make sure you do a proper business model canvas as a quick way of validating your idea. It's not, we didn't make that up. It's out there. Just Google business model canvas. It just forces you to think about what's really your value proposition. What makes you unique? Where's the supply coming from? What is the product going to be? All of that kind of stuff. It's just a one-page poster. Okay. Just use something like that to get started. As an ideas person myself, I'll do 1 or 2 of those a month. Just to stress test an idea. And it's not because I'm going to do anything with it, but it's just like, what was I smoking when I thought of this idea? It's kind of a good, but it's almost like when you're thinking about it as a business idea rather than, oh, that would be cool. Wouldn't that be great? That sort of thing. So I think the business model canvas is a good one. I think the other one is, it's always good to learn about how money works. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean how accounting is done, right? I just mean cash flow. Or even cash flow. I mean things like, what is equity? What makes an idea attractive to a private equity company or a VC company? Where is the money flowing from and to? Like when you hear about things like all the VC money is going into whatever, generative AI and AI technologies and whatever currently, today in 2024. Well, no one really thinks about where is that money not going that it would have gone otherwise. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got tons of organizations who were previously well-funded and so forth who are being screwed over because, they're no longer sexy. And guess what's going to happen? All of these companies that get tremendous amount of money from the current bubble, right? When the market realizes that, while there are going to be big winners in that, not all of those businesses are going to be successful, and something else will come along. I don't know what it will be, but something else will come along, and suddenly all of those companies that were the darlings of this generation will, not be the next. You see it with Web 3.0 companies. You've seen it with Bitcoin, crypto companies. You've seen it with, there's so many of them, right? And so that's what I mean by learn how capital works. What does $1 million get you? What does $500,000 get you? Knowing what do you need from a teaming and organizational perspective. How do you prioritize what's most important? Like, I tell you what I hate, and I see all the time. People have an idea, they go out, buy a domain, they create a website, and they say they launched a business. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's a little bit like, I've got this amazing person, spend all this time and effort thinking about the wedding day, which happens here a lot in the US. And then it's like, oh God, I have to live with them afterwards. Like, what are our beliefs? What are our dreams? How do we like to parent? Do we even want to parent? All these things that haven't been given a huge amount of thought to, which it's still shocking to me that goes on so much. But there is a lot of that.
yeah.
Just try to get to the wedding day. That tends to be the focus.
Yeah. And ultimately, this isn't a rule, but my advice is it's really hard to launch a business without 3 people. You could have 3, like a core unit of 3, because if you're on your own, it's too lonely and there's just too much to do and you get lost in your own head. Okay. 2 is a problem because you'd have a tiebreaker situation. They've got no one to break a tiebreaker. Okay. So you kind of ideally want 3. And then you want to think not just in terms of, and then I'm not talking about what roles they play. Is that CEO, CFO, COO? It could be, it doesn't have to be. It could be whatever, okay? But then the chemistry's got to work, right? You need someone who's, got a lot of energy and ambition and push, but you need someone that provides stability too,
More pragmatic.
Yeah, and you probably need someone to make sure you're just being diligent and not stupid, right? I mean, there's a chemistry composition of that as well. And even and sometimes that manifests itself in terms of, demographics, age profile, gender profile, all these sorts of things, right? Not because you're trying to be, just to be clear, in this conversation, not because you're trying to meet some objective
target
for being, a certain proportion of people have to be, you're not after a diversity statistic. It's just more recognizing that there's a formula that's going to be required that isn't just what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. And other discipline areas and other ways of thinking are going to be just as important to make sure that you actually have a working and sustainable business at this point anyway. So I think those are probably the main ones. Get your mentors. And then ultimately, you're going to hear us say it all the time, build your 5-year goals, not just for yourself, but also for your business. Do that ThinqShift style North Starring exercise. Get your core leadership team to commit to at least 2-3 years, because it's going to be ups and downs. Work through genuinely, truly, how many months or years can you go without earning a penny? Simple questions like, if 1 month we can't make payroll for everybody, then who's going to get paid and who's not? And the answer is you should get paid last. Just to be clear, right? And if you're not comfortable with you being the last person to get paid, you're probably not ready to be an entrepreneur. Okay? There's all of these sorts of, if you work through those scenarios and just write them down, if this happens, that's what I'm going to do. If this happens, that's what I'm going to do. Then it won't stress you out when it does happen. And then you'll be very stable. But if you don't think about them at the time, you're going to panic when things do go wrong. And if you panic when things go wrong, your whole business will collapse. Because 1, your talent will run away. 2, you won't be able to focus on what's going to get you out of that hole. And it'll just end badly.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, there's all sorts of tools and techniques and things that, if people are interested in, let us know, and we'll do some work on that. But to me, these are the things we've covered in this podcast are more the ones that no one will ever tell you, or if they do, they tell you in very cryptic ways.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up there, Vibs. So hopefully we provided good food for thought as you're thinking about leaving your corporate gig and starting up your own thing. Maybe it's that lovely coffee shop idea, and then you start to look at the numbers and realize how tough that is. It might be more a bigger idea, self-employed. You may be one of the wannapreneurs. Ultimately, you now have a whole range of different dimensions to think about. And for those that want to do it, we've hopefully given you some really good ideas on how to get started. And we're always here to chat, hear from you, and help you on this journey. Until next time, be fabulous.